Hopefully by now you've had a chance to make your chord progression, and today we're going to look at how we can maybe make this chord progression slightly more interesting, and I'm also going to do a chord progression in a different key just so that we're learning to create music in different keys. So today we'll work in C major, and I'm going to add this slightly quicker maybe than the last video because hopefully you're familiar with it, but I'm going to add a track and I'm going to add a keyboard, and I'm just going to focus on the piano for now. And I'm going to add a section up here to my piano, my grand piano track, and I've got my piano roll open here, selected my pencil, so I'm ready to input some notes. And remember that here we have a bar, and I'm just zooming in there, and this bar is split into these 4 beats of the bar, and so I'm just going to put in a C chord. And I've had a couple of students I've been working with ask me about what these numbers and letters mean here, and so I guess that this is just all to do with the pitch. So C1 is lower than C2 and C3, and of course if you do create something and then you want to make it higher in pitch, you can highlight it all and drag it. And so we have a C chord. Now I'm going to make sure that I've got one of these on every beat of the bar, and I'm just going to select, hold down Alt, and then click and drag. So we've got our C chord there. I'm then going to go back up here and I'm going to create another region, and in this region I'm going to add a G chord. And I'll talk a little bit again about inversions, because what I want to do here is I'm going to add a G chord in, but I'm going to start on a B. So rather than starting with a G, I'm going to do a B, a D, and then a G. And the reason for doing this is it just helps the chords to flow slightly more here, because we're not jumping up to a G or jumping down, but as you can see we've maintained this G from our C chord carries on here at the same pitch, and that just helps to create a little bit more continuity. And inversions are just where we are changing the note that's in the bass. The lowest note of the chord is changed, and it does make the chord sound different, and so you just need to check that it's the sound that you want, but that's what I've done for my G chord. And then we're in C major, so I'm now going to create another region, and I'm now going to do an A minor chord. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my C here, and then I'm going to do an E, and then an A. And then I'm just going to drag this out to every beat of the bar. And this is a very, very standard chord progression for a pop song or a lot of different types of songs. And then I'm just going to add my F chord. So again, I'm going to have my C here, F, A. My goal here is to try and create a chord progression which is nice and smooth and fluent. And this is a bit of a repeat of part 2. But it's always worth just going over things. But I am working in a different key signature now, so if C major is more for you, then this might be perfect. So here's my chord progression. There we go. And of course, if we're creating a song, and this is where I want to start to build upon part 2, what we're going to want to do is think, okay, well, how many times do we want these 4 bars? Do we want them to happen twice, 3 times, 4 times? And of course that will depend on our song, and it's something that we might want to change as we move through. And it might be that we want to actually have some of the chords lasting for longer, in which case we can move things around. These regions here we can just move around, or we can highlight everything, hold down Alt, click and drag, and then they will repeat. What I wanted to touch on though is how we can change these chords to make them a little bit more interesting, make them a little bit more of a kind of pop piano sound. And what we're going to look at is suspended chords, or sus chords. You may have seen on music C sus2 or C sus4. And this is where, with our C chord, we take this middle note. So I'm going to click on this E, and I'm going to move it down to a D. I'm going to do the same here. And this is a C sus2 chord. And basically what we're doing is we're having the second note. So that's where the 2 comes from. And that second note is kind of clashing a little bit with our C. And that's what gives it this word suspension. It's a kind of harmonic feature. Have a little listen to what it sounds like. That's a C sus2. If we were to, instead of moving down to the D, move our E up to the F, or the 4th note, we would have a C sus4. Let's have a listen to that. And so creating suspended chords or sus chords, whether it be a C sus2 or a G sus2, is something you might want to try just to give something a little bit different to your piece. I'm just going to move these back down for now. Now obviously you need to think about what we've just done there. We've moved the middle note of the chord. So for our G chord here, because I changed the inversion, our middle note here, our B, is actually down at the bottom. So it's just important to think that we're moving our middle note when we're creating these sus chords. So that's something that you might like to try. Once we've got our chord pattern, and I've just copied it twice here, what you may like to try is then creating a slightly different chord pattern for maybe a bridge section or for our chorus section. And it's good to use these 4 chords that we've created here, but you might want to just say, well, take one of them and repeat it again. So let's just take this A minor chord, and maybe we want to have a little bit of a moment of A minor, and then maybe we want to just have A minor to F for a little while. I'll highlight both of those, and we'll have 4 bars of A minor and F. Let's listen to the whole progression. And it might be that when we get to here, this feels like we're building up towards something. So maybe let's just go into this final chord here and have a look at maybe editing it a little bit, because I feel like we want to rest on this last chord. So I'm going to delete these here, and I feel like what I want to do is actually drag out these notes here so we have a nice long F chord. Let's just listen to that minor major section that I've created here. And that just creates something a little bit different, and so you can go back in and edit your chords. So what we've looked at today is creating a pattern in C major. We've also looked at creating sus chords, sus2 and sus4, by moving that middle note of the chord up or down. Moving it down creates the sus2, moving it up creates the sus4. And then we've also looked at how we can use these chords or regions that we've created to create different chord patterns and different chord progressions. And in a song you might find that you have the same progression for the whole time, but you might find that you have a different progression for the chorus or for the bridge section. It might be that you also want to change the way that the chords are played, the rhythm of the chords. And we looked at that in part 1, and I'll just take this region here, because there is, when you zoom in, you can really start to get into some detail with these chords and the beats and how they're played. And of course you just have to work out where things are on your window when you zoom in. But don't feel that every chord has to start on the first beat of the bar. So you may well want to create a sense of syncopation. Syncopation is where we kind of don't stress the first beat of the bar. We stress different beats of the bar to kind of throw the listener off and make it sound a little bit more interesting. So I'm just going to see what I can come up with here. Just create some syncopation, create some slightly more interesting rhythms. Let's see what I can do here. And of course we can move to any any square on here, any of these blocks, and Soundtrap will just snap the chords exactly where we want them. And you can really experiment with where you put these chords just to see what it sounds like. If it doesn't sound very good, you can change it. So let's just have a listen to this region here. Oh, I feel like there's too many in this middle section here, so I might just delete that one, and I might delete that one, and I might delete that one. Now let's see what it sounds like. And that just sounds a little bit more interesting, and it gives it a little bit more of a sense of style. And that's something that you want to start to think about. So as you're creating your chord progressions, think about maybe adding some sus chords, maybe changing your rhythms around, and also using your chords and using these regions to start to create different sections for your piece. And in the next video, we're going to look at how we can add a bass line to start to bring our pop song to life. And then we'll be able to start to look at the other layers that we can add. What we're doing here is adding our chord layer, our kind of foundation of the harmony in our piece. But we've also looked at how we can alter that harmony with the sus chords, and we're also looking at our rhythm and how we can create a sense of rhythm in our piece by changing around where these chords are played, on what beat of the bar they're played, etc., and also for how long they're played. So hopefully that's been useful to you, and hopefully you can start to really build up an interesting and exciting chord progression. But what's really going to make our piece come alive is when we start to add bass and drums, and then eventually add a melody over the top. All the best with making your chord progression.